do sit, I was told I have to sit in one of these. It's not uncomfortable, Kira. It's not even dangerous. All right, so she challenged me to sit in a yo-yo thing.
Cultural and theatrical.
Yeah, that's right, the intersection of sculptural and theatrical. So I guess let me get started with let me try and ask a question. And then what we'd really like is, the whole idea is to have a conversation. So anytime you have a thing comes into your mind, you have a question, please either shout it out, or if you feel like you want to be in second grade, you can raise your hand. We assume that you will accept the rules of decorum, wait till other people finish and all that kind of stuff. I was taking down some notes, and so I have a bunch of questions, but let me just start with my first question that I wrote down here. Everybody, the idea of the boundary spanner is very cool. Like, we all need a boundary spanner. How do you grow it? How do you find it? How does that come? Or does it come, or can you force that thing? The idea of trying to, do you create a collaboration, or does a collaboration create itself? How about that for a question? And in any order, there's 2 microphones. If you want to pass it, just pass it.
Anybody have a ready answer? They want to jump in?
Well, I mean, I don't have a boundary spanner. I actually created. Is that what you're saying? Yes. Boundary spanner. So I mean, I use books as my goal to collaborate with that. I use the literary arts to set up the collaboration, because I mean, I'm collaborating with an author without them even being there. I'm finding inspiration from that. That's what I do.
So a key idea of a successful boundary spanner is someone who actually immerses themselves in more than one community. So you can't just visit, you need to immerse yourself. And for a lot of people, that's actually very scary, because in one community you might be an expert and pretty senior, and you go into another community and they don't know who you are at all, and you feel, lost, and why doesn't everyone recognize my name? So I think you have to be brave and recognize that going into a new community, you start out lower in the hierarchy, and that's okay. It's not a big deal. The important thing is you're there to learn new, cool ideas. And so I would say that's really important to become a boundary spanner, is be brave, and it's okay to start lower than you are in your existing community.
John, can you take this from us? Because you were talking about the power structure of conversation and collaboration.
Well, I think that one thing we're going to look at is that, I mean, I hate to go back to the old saw, well, the next generation is going to do it differently, because that doesn't often work out that way, and that often things happen over and over again. But one thing that may be happening is that the way in which youth embrace technology and art and various disciplines is that those boundaries may break down over time, so that you find people coming up in worlds where, oh yeah, I can hang with the scientists, and I can hang with the musicians, and I can hang with the farmers, because I did that farming thing for a while, and now and then I went to school and I learned some technology, and I'm thinking that in the end that may be a goal for civilization as we know it, to become. It'll still have boundaries, but virtually everybody will have some element of being a boundary spanner.
I think that in this generation in the arts, we sometimes form ghettos. We feel much more comfortable with theater people if we're in the theater. We feel much more comfortable with musicians if we're musicians. And by finding ways to cross paths with others and to engage in conversations, and by meeting as many people as you can and putting together groups on purpose to do these things, which everyone here in this room seems to do, that's how we're going to all be able to get out of those little ghettos and learn more, and it will really help all of our creativity and all of our collaboration processes.
Oh, now, when you guys started, you didn't have an expectation for a result. Jenny, can you talk about what at least 7, how you approach things so you don't have expectations?
So it's really about you too, because when Garth and I get together, we get really excited about weird things, like wouldn't it be cool if, which is kind of what I was trying to say earlier. And so as soon as I heard about Bushwick, I just thought, oh my gosh, you know, they're doing music about books, and Garth and I are also musicians, although he say he's not. And so it just felt like we should do something. We should do something. I have no idea what. I have no idea about what. We should just keep talking until something happens. So that was that.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, I think in addition to it maybe requiring intention and bravery, it's kind of contagious. I think that, and maybe that plays into what John was saying about the generation component of it, but I think when people, the more that you're surrounded by people who are dipping into lots of different places, the more that curiosity carries over, I think. And so the more that people are not sticking to their ghetto, the more everyone will be able to span, if that's the word we're using.
So the two kind of ideas that are coming up here are the ideas of, that I'm hearing at least, and correct me, and jump in anybody, I'm sorry if I'm so engaged in the conversation, right? But the ideas of ego or power, right? And then the idea of risk, the idea of going outside of our ghetto and trying something different, and then being evaluated and then being put on a lower level, or maybe having that, oh, I don't want this to be recorded because I don't really do that kind of thing. How does that, what do we, is that what you're saying in a sense, the idea of collaboration is these are what's at stake for us? And have you experienced that, or is there a way to get through that, or am I going completely the wrong direction? Power.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot about relinquishing power, I think, you know, like at least in the example of Genre Bender, since that's what I talked about, the artists are often like, wow, that sounds great. Wow, that sounds like I might really make an ass of myself, you know? And like, there's gonna be a whole big room full of people, and what's gonna happen? And it's funny because there's that hesitation, but that's where the payoff is, you know what I mean? And then the energy kind of comes from that, you know? Now we can confidently walk into the ask and say, hello, artist, we want you to do this thing, and it's gonna be awesome, we promise. You're gonna love it. You're gonna learn something that you never could anticipate, that we can't spell out for you in advance. We haven't picked them.
I think you do both. I mean, you keep your identity and you blend. I think one of the classic examples of that nowadays is hip hop. In terms of, if you're a hip hop artist, you may be a poet, you may be a DJ, you may be a musician, you may be a dancer, and you may know technology. It's just part of working in that field and working in that area, and I think that's what's happening. I think that's where things are going to go.
And that's what I was talking about with owning what you're best at with your organization. Just own what you're best at, and then reach out for those different organizations that you want to partner with or different ideas. I think it's, for me, it's not hip hop. It's jazz is the thing that I think about. Jazz is in everything. Jazz is inside every single kind of music. It's in hip hop. It's in everything. And those jazz musicians are the ones that you want playing your country music songs. I promise you that. It's yeah.
I would say, recognizing that for a lot of artists it is about grant writing and so forth. You need to be able to have a narrative or a spin, and you need to look coherent, right? And that's just kind of the way it is. But that said, you can shape your spin depending on your audience, right? So, if you're, for example, applying for a grant from a very traditional dance organization that has very, traditional ideas about what Butoh is, then you're going to characterize that one way, plus, and then you're incorporating this cool interdisciplinary aspect, but at core, you're this, amazing Butoh dancer. Versus, some other organization where, the Butoh is just sort of ancillary to what they care about. And so I think it's really just about sort of, you need to look coherent, but also can spin how you're selling yourself depending on the audience that you're talking to.
Well, I think that, there are many art forms that feel kind of like no one really notices them. They're so below the radar and stuff like that. I mean, it's like a common thing in the arts. And I think that what's really great is to get out of that place is to start doing other collaborations. So you have to start it yourself before the stranger in the City Arts is going to pay any attention. You have to start thinking, what can I do to gather my resources with other kinds of artists, and maybe we put on this like really bizarre show that keeps my Butoh intact, but also has some opera going on, and also has a spoken word and blah blah blah, and this is going to be like the greatest thing ever. And then this, the stranger and City Arts are going to want to cover it, and they're going to hear how great it was, and so it's the collaboration actually helps us bring up these art forms out of that kind of place where no one recognizes them, I think.
And maybe the root of the collaboration is always relationships themselves, right? I mean, there's the thing that you make when you're working with someone, but maybe the most important thing that you're making is the relationship or the deepening of the relationship. So I think anytime, and this in reality happens with City Arts, like often it feels like there's kind of like even when I came in, there was a sort of a core, and we just keep adding to the core, and we keep absorbing things in, and we'll be like, okay, now we have, for example, there's a Butoh cover story coming soon to a magazine near you. So, but that idea that we're sort of introducing our more general interest audience to all these different kinds of things, and that part of how that naturally happens is that sometimes there's like a gateway drug type of a performance that might be a collaboration that's multidisciplinary, and oftentimes it's some kind of a relationship where like something just tips things along.
I think that she needs to talk to Emmett Montgomery for Weird and Awesome with Emmett Montgomery.
Yeah, Weird and Awesome with Emmett Montgomery is for you.
He has a variety show. There's various variety shows around town where you can just plug your art form into. That's the one that I know.
Good idea. Good question. Yeah, I mean, well, I guess one clarifying thing I should say is that 3, 1, and 1 or whatever idea, it's not the same for everyone. Like some people, the one that like I thought was, oh God, is the one that other people love the most. So there's not a consistency there to begin with, but even still, there are ways to avoid the pitfalls or what have you. And I think a lot of that is about not waiting till the last minute, and even scope and ambition. I think collaboration has this way of like exploding, so that you have a million different things that you want to try to do, or your idea just gets so big, and then because there's 2 of you, you're just, bigger and bigger and bigger. And sometimes you have to be able to rein that in some, or pick some piece of it to tackle, and not try to do everything all at once, and that has a big impact. And thinking realistically about tech. What are you really going to be able to accomplish with the pieces?
Realistic expectations are something that's big to think about. When we did Seattle 7, we did the novel live. We did 36 writers on stage at Hugo House writing a novel in real time while the words were being broadcast on a screen over the author's head, and also simulcast on the internet. And we're dealing with writers who have huge egos, by the way, huge. Yeah, and they were like, I don't write in public. I'm like, you're going to write in public for this, right? And the thing is, they said, well, but it's going to be horrible, it's going to be bad, and what we basically said was, no one's going to see it, no one's going to care, and it's going to raise money for education. And they're like, okay, I can do that. Of course, everybody saw it, and everybody cared, and they published, but we lied, but it doesn't matter. What we need to do is remove the risk from it. So once we get the risk out of there, say, hey, don't worry, no one's going to care if you're naked, they're like, oh, okay, and then No, yeah, and, and then the Jenny being the administrator.
Well, we didn't say that no one would see it. We actually got a hospital curtain that we could draw in front of them in case they were too shy to write in public.
We got a curtain.
And then the peer pressure, no one would use it, so it was.
I will say there is a value in failing beautifully. The project I'm working on, 92, is a half-century commemoration of an event that happened in New York in 1966 called 9 Evenings, Theater and Engineering, which was a collaboration between scientists and artists, one of the first major collaborations that happened like that. 10 artists, 10 scientists, including Robert Rauschenberg and John Cage, and a lot of famous choreographers of the time, including Lucinda Childs and Deborah Hay. But the thing that was amazing about it was that even when it failed, and I think there were some of the performances were, as it was genre benders, but they were still wildly, crazily attractive to watch because they were just so intense and so amazing. So, I mean, I guess that's the goal. If you're going to fail, do it with an immense amount of power and style.
I always love watching musicians fail on stage. It's so much fun. It's like that's what jazz is all about, and what songwriting, performing one song once in a performance is all about, is failure. What was your original question? I'm kind of curious.
I was just asking for your insight on how to shift or perhaps even dissolve collaboration.
Yeah, so that made me think immediately of the Police, the band. No, the band. They hated each other. They couldn't even be in the same room together. And that band is awesome. So awesome. I mean, we know we can all sing 20 of their songs. And did they dissolve it eventually? Yeah, they dissolved it because they couldn't handle it anymore. But sometimes that just like grinding is the best part, in my opinion. And so I'm not sure. I haven't seen City. I'm actually going to go this year for sure. But it sounds so awesome. I love watching things fail. I think that's part of the beauty of it as well. I love watching things fail.
So why dissolve?
Do you like being in the one that fails?
But I would say, I mean, I've done a lot of interdisciplinary collaborations over the years in various contexts, and when it fails, it's usually personality difference versus, say, expertise or interest or passion or whatever. And for that reason, I like to think of it as it's sort of like dating. You know, like you don't throw yourself into it full hog right away. You go out on a date first, right? You do like a little thing together, see how that goes. Then you do something a little bit bigger. You know, then as you get to know each other and share and build trust, then your collaborations become larger. And so you want like that sort of low risk first date collaboration, and then you sort of escalate from there if it turns out you get along well as collaborators. And the same way that you might break up with somebody, you would break up with a collaborator because your dates aren't going very well.
Last idea, if you guys could talk about in your work, the idea of being adaptive, being flexible, and you know, you've already touched on it, the same idea. When do you cut and run? When do you push forward? We all as artists have these battles that we fight with maybe a piece of work that we have, whether it be visual or literary or whatever, where there's that moment of crisis, and do you push through it or do you cut and run? Can you talk a little bit about how your organizations or your projects have adapted over time or gone away?
Well, yeah, I mean, this idea that, like, here's a thing that's part of a giant festival goes away, let's make it bigger, better, scarier, more expensive, and see what happens, and hopefully not lose our shirts or our reputation. And I think, yeah, you always push through it, actually. Like, even if, I don't know, I mean, I'm a double down kind of person, and maybe that's because I do a reset every month, and so I am always thinking, like, this is never the last one. There's always another one. And I think that's true no matter what you're making, but you double down and you get in there and you battle if you have to, because that's when the interesting stuff actually happens, when the friction is there. If it's all just like, oh yeah, I love you, great, you know, like that's gonna sometimes yield something good, but not necessarily.
How many people here have actually been to a hackathon? Couple? Yeah. So one of the things I'd like to see is artists do hackathons. I think in the technology industry, they've worked out really well. It's like this sort of like dating almost. So you have a 3-day, say, weekend where you get together, you just come with your skills, you show up with maybe some vague idea of what you want to do, but not too concrete, and then you just do a project, a collaboration the next 3 days. And I've seen out of these hackathons, long-term, amazing collaborations that evolved into entire companies, and I've also seen them just spiral out, and then they never, they just don't exist after the 3 days. But in those 3 days, from that immersive collaboration, you learn those others so well that you know if you want to continue or not from that weekend collaboration. And I actually think they work very, very well. And I think it'd be great to see, Candace's experience some of these. I'd like to see that kind of almost like, brief immersion experiences for artists as well.
I've been running this conversation series now for about 20 years, and it's funny because suddenly, oh yeah, it's going to happen in 3 weeks, and I don't have any guests, and I need to find them now. And you sometimes, often that will work in a crazy, you go to a party, and suddenly when the party's over, you have the conversation guests lined up because it just happened. But sometimes they don't. And sometimes you get conversations where 3 of the conversation guests are stellar and the 4th is not. But then you realize that probably possibly the person who got the most out of the thing was that 4th guest, because it was basically their thing to listen, and they needed that. And that was cool, because even in their listening, they informed the conversation. So all of that works.
We just battle through. Musicians will just battle through. We have a job to do. We just get it done. Nothing. I just always charge through myself.